when they had this announcement, this big announcement from NASA about this bacteria that they thought it was RNA encoded.
Oh, that the arsenic-based life.
Yeah, when they were gonna make this announcement, people were already speculating, oh, it's alien life. And a friend of mine was saying like, well, this is not gonna be some flimsy bacteria in Mars, is it? And
can I see if I can understand your question, Chandra? I mean, if what I understood you to mean when you said a social impact if they found life elsewhere, I was perhaps incorrect again, and do correct me if I am wrong. I was assuming that you were thinking of the impact that it may have on religion and the idea that religious people have that life is exclusive to Earth. Have I misunderstood your point?
Including religion, but not just that. It seems like it started to feel to me like that actually many people would be very unfazed if we found bacteria outside Earth. But maybe if we find something that looks like a jellyfish or some sort of space trilobite, that the situation would already be far different. And,
I actually think people would get more depressed if they found something, but it wasn't intelligent life.
An interstellar jellyfish.
Right.
I'd be excited by that, not depressed.
Exoplanet jellyfish. I think the right kind of people would be, but most people only read the headlines and they say, oh, it looks like there's some cyanobacteria on the backside of Alpha Centauri's third planet. Most people, I think, would say, well, that's all we're likely to ever see. That's the only observation we've ever made. I think your science proponents, we're all holding our breath until, E.T. comes down from the giant light-up spaceship. I think, honestly, if
and
all
pulls out his array of anal probes.
Until he has an inbuilt one in his hand already.
If you looked at the Earth from the point of view of an alien, it's a planet primarily of viruses, secondarily of bacteria, and then as you go up the chain, I mean, you can see that the mammals have been doing a lot of manipulation of the environment, but it all depends on your scale. If you're someone who looks at what the dominant populations are, they're obviously very dominated by virus and single-celled organisms. I think likely if there is life on other planets, we'll be able to detect that 9/10 of it at least, probably far more than that, will be single-celled life. I think the chances of, we're going to probably find a couple thousand planets with some schmutz growing on it long before we'll find anything with a backbone or any kind of awareness of its environment.
Is that a scientific expression? Schmutz?
Schmutz.
I'm actually wondering about the quantity of planets with single-cell organisms we're going to find before we find something intelligent. Because if it's anything like Earth, it's going to be transmitting electromagnetic stuff into space. Like maybe broadcasting alien porn or something. Unintendedly.
Bring on what were the green women in Star Trek called?
Sorry, what?
The green women in Star Trek.
I'm not familiar enough with.
Were they Orion slave girls? Orion slave girls.
That might. Oh, there we go. The Orion slave girls. Oh, maybe it is the Orion slave girls. There we go. You're right.
You have a wonderful ability to lower the tone of the show, Thunderfoot. I'm sorry that I'm going to cut you short because we've got one more caller and we've got
okay.
minutes before we can normally end.
No, Don Exodus used to lower the tone of the show. Don Exodus could bring us down to base zero with one comment.
And I have to say, for those that may wonder what's happened to Don Exodus, he's, I think, trying to rename the Virgin Islands single-handedly. I did ask him recently whether he would consider coming back for a show. He seemed sort of like half enthusiastic about it, but I suspect for some months to come his mind is on other things. But I know I've missed someone out, and I can't remember who it is. I'll try and get to you if we can, but I'm going to go to Klingshaw next. Klingshaw is one of the regular panelists on, as I say, what is referred to as our sister show, the Gin and Tonic Show, which, if you're not familiar with it, it's currently running on Saturday evenings, one day before. It does it every 2 weeks, as we do, but it's one day before we do. It used to be alternate, but because of the charity event, things have got sort of like synced. Concordance, and then we'll come to you, Klingshaw.
Just really quick, what I will get excited about is the first exoplanet with all 3 phases of water. With that, I think we have our first opportunity to see something living, and that should be fairly simple.
Let me just sort of
you. Sorry,
let me put in the physical chemist, whatever. Almost any planet with almost any form of heat generation will have all 3 phases of water. In that, in the atmosphere, there will come a point where it'll freeze, and all you need is enough heat to get above 100 to generate the steam. And those are actually really quite common. Now, I think you're right that to have lots of water in all of those 3 phases is a little more of a tricky balance.
That's what I mean to say. Yeah.
Sorry, I was being pedantic.
So
sorry.
Thunderfoot.
No, but it's a valid point, because you have Titan and you have Mars. I mean, in this solar system alone, there are planets and moons with lots of water. Some of them probably have multiple phases, and I think that's going to be the secret to where to look.
I think you're both wrong. I appreciate your contributions, but I think you're both wrong, because I have it on very good authority that there is not one drop of water in the entire universe except on Earth, and that authority is, of course, Vernon Fang X. Better authority is that he has his ear to the words, mouth of God, or whatever it is. Anyway, stop. We're going to take Klingshaw. We'll have to leave this for another occasion. Klingshaw, welcome to the show.
Hey, buddy. I was glad to hear that you're jealous of our iTunes capacity on the Gin and Tonic Show. That was very heartening.
There's a lot of things about you I'm jealous about, Klingshaw.
Should I? Here, why not?
Don't blush. It's okay. There we go. He's such a dishy chap, Klingshaw. A lot of people haven't seen him in real life before, but, well, he's a silhouette at the moment.
Here I am, for all to see. Anyway, and I'm showing off my glorious looks. So, given global Muslim perception, sorry, it's an Islam question. I can't ask any Christianity questions because Christianity is so boring.
You look like you're in a bomb shelter. With like cinder block walls.
I have been making these videos about Islam, so. Anyway, given global Muslim perceptions, courtesy of Pew polls, etc., it's clear that the religion of Islam is still ultra-conservative and relatively radicalized in relation to Christianity and Judaism. Clearly, Muslims in general need to become more liberal if we're all to survive and flourish as a species and get along. So my question is this: how should a Muslim approach his scripture and religion? So, for example, conservative anti-Muslim bigots often assert that Muslims need to openly acknowledge the shitty contents of their scripture. According to this view, Muslims need to live in a constant state of apology for the bad things in their scripture and for the bad things that Muslims have done historically. Is this a realistic expectation of Muslims? Is this a viable mindset that liberal Muslims should adopt? That's my question.
Concordance.
When I think Islam will become more progressive? When the oil money runs out. Because I honestly think that commerce and diplomacy have softened Christianity in parts of the world that I think, honestly, you cannot have trade with people who want to kill you. You cannot have radical beliefs and have good diplomacy, right? We're never going to have good relations in the Middle East with the West so long as that particularly virulent strain of Islam is dominant. And there's going to come a time when it's going to be a matter of sink or swim, starve or get along. I honestly think that the world stage, the diplomacy, the trade, is what softened other religions as well. In particular, Christianity had to go along to get along in a lot of places. It had to cooperate.
Well, let me put, because of time, I'm sorry to interrupt, but let me just address or put this point to concordance, if I may. The relationships between Saudi Arabia and the United States seem to be fairly congenial, and there's a lot of trade between them. And yet in Saudi Arabia there are still beheadings for apostasy and homosexuality and the like. So I don't think that the trade issue is actually a valid point.
No, but at this point they have the power. They have the say-so. You say that they're good relations. The order of magnitude or the flow of power right now is very certainly the Saudis are codependent on the U.S. for military support, but the Saudis have 90% of the power in the relationship. When that relationship changes, when they're trying to export manufactured goods, when they no longer have this precious resource that they can hold the world ransom for, I think the power relationship will change.
Well, you're right in that Saudi Arabia and its fellow Gulf countries literally spend billions with a B, billions of dollars spreading their Wahhabi, well, they call it Salafi Islam, but their Wahhabi Islam all around the world. And for example, last show or the show before, I remember watching, and Thunderfoot asked if there was any kind of common theme with all the groups who were protesting violently throughout the Muslim world. And from what I can see, Salafism was the common theme. Most of these violent groups are Salafis, which is spawned by Saudi Arabia and the petrodollar funding of Saudi Arabia. So yeah, you're right. When the oil money falls, when the oil power falls, it'll cut the funding for extremists and Salafis. But what I'm more looking at is the actual this is all kind of the subtle economics behind people's motivations. It's all kind of unconscious, you could say. Like, no, Christians didn't consciously go, oh, cool, I now have McDonald's and good trade, so now I'm going to be liberal. That was, an unconscious factor. I'm thinking more of their conscious mindset that they can adopt. Is it realistic for them to be apologetic? Because, like, for example, with Christians, and I'm aware of time, so I'll try and speed this up. But with Christians, for example, even though they might be able to say, "Oh yeah, the Old Testament has some bad things," they're not apologetic for it because they're like, "Oh yeah, it was just some historical mindset." Whereas a lot of, in my experience with the people who I interact with, some people indicate and express that they think that Muslims should be in a state of apology for the scripture, and they need to acknowledge, that their scriptures are evil and disgusting, and that's the only. Otherwise, they're extremists or whatever. Is that a realistic mindset? Because it just seems like it's with what we're having with Christians, that isn't the case, and it isn't a realistic mindset for them to adopt, like this self-abasement kind of thing. Is it better for people to delude themselves and to think my scriptures are really peaceful and liberal when they're not, basically?
I see Thunderfoot scribbling. I'm not sure he's back with us. I know we.
No, I'm back.
Okay,
yeah, I mean, for me, this isn't so much about what's in the scriptures, because all of these, the Christian scriptures are bloody crazy. If you actually were to try and live by scripture, you would end up with something that's not that far off Islam or
I'll put it out here. The Bible is worse than the Quran and Hadith. It's way worse. Nowhere in Quran and Hadith is there genocide.
Klingshaw, can I just clarify something? When you say it's worse, are you saying it's worse in its depiction of history or in its instruction?
Instruction, most definitely. I mean, like the Quran, like the Bible has stoning for so many things, like and the prescription for the death penalty is so liberally, doled out in the Bible for so many silly things.
Sticks.
Yeah, or being disobedient to your parents, or answering back. Like, this is a lot more extreme than what we have in the Quran.
However, where it does vary, I think, is in the sort of face-to-face real violence. So a lot of the violence that you get in the Bible is
fictitious.
Sort of, yeah. It's God kills everyone in the global genocide. Well, that's in both, but Muhammad's actually, when you compare him to Jesus, Muhammad actually is personally involved in a lot of the killings in a way that Jesus isn't.
True.
But I mean, all of that sort of peripheral issue, in that with Christianity, we've seen its rather bloody history over the past 2,000 years, and the sort of house-trained version that we have of it now. There's no particular reason why Islam can't just ignore how batshit crazy some of the scriptures are and make it. What really matters?
I hate interrupting. I know, and I'm acutely aware of the time, which is why I'm doing it. Obviously, and I don't think this is necessarily directly addressing Klingshaw's point, but for example, the recent shooting by the Taliban of a 15-year-old schoolgirl on a school bus, a very large majority, a significant number of people in Pakistan came out in protest against that. So it's clear that, in some regards, those people do not follow the strict interpretation of the Quran that the Taliban does. And I think that's encouraging in a way, isn't it? So in a way, isn't it not the point, Klingshaw, that a lot of people, or a lot of Muslims, are already sort of like watering down or cherry picking?
Oh, absolutely. I have some Muslim friends who are like more liberal than a lot of atheists I know, and they're fantastic people, and they do have a very liberal interpretation. I was just asking you guys and seeing what you thought.
Okay, well, I'm sorry I interrupted you. I know Concordance and both Thunderfoot want to come back. We'll come back to you, Thunderfoot, first, because I was impolite enough to interrupt you, and then we'll go to Concordance.
Right. Well, I think that one of the problems with Islam is it has higher barriers to change than Christianity. And the reason I say that is you can sort of see it in places like Pakistan, where recently they had some punch-up about the blasphemy laws. And a load of people said, look, these blasphemy laws make us the sort of laughing stock of the world. We've got to change them. And the minister who actually said that was actually shot by his own bodyguard, for specifically religious reasons. And when the bodyguard was asked about it, he said, yeah, I did it for his religion. And so there is this thing where the worst offenders in Islam, it's sort of true in most religions, but I think it's more so with Islam, is the worst people in the world are the people who try to water down the religion or to pervert
within the religion, within the hermeneutics of the religion.
Yeah. Or even worse are people who leave the religion, because this is tantamount to saying that it's false, because you have accepted, sort of in Christianity as well. Yeah, that you actually know that Muhammad is the messenger and that there's one, he's the messenger of the one true God. But to leave the faith means that you are rejecting what you know is true. And so you are the worst person in the world. You know the truth and you reject it.
Murtad.
Yeah.
The Arabic word for apostate.
So the barriers to change, I think, are higher with Islam. And the other thing is that if you take a look at the sort of auto-reinforcement behaviors that are required by Islam, the one that specifically springs to mind is praying 5 times a day, makes it very hard and socially awkward to either stop praying. You instantly stick your head above the parapet and draw attention to yourself by not praying to Islam 5 times a day. And I know what you think about this, but if you take a broad brush look at the world, what you'll find is the countries that tend to be Islam heavy tend to be disproportionately Islam heavy, right? Whereas the
the only
Christian
countries in the
ones
world that punish homosexuality with the death penalty, apostasy with the death penalty, adultery with the death penalty, they're all Muslim countries. So,
but it's also a strange thing that countries, they tend to either be 90% Muslim or not. Yeah, there are a few examples.
Oh, I see.
Where it's
Nigeria, for example, 50-50. But
but even with the 50-50, it's a fairly homogeneous population. Turkey, I think, is another one where they got a fair old mix.
Concordance.
I still think, and maybe I'm not all that well informed on this, but it still seems like the poorest areas, the least powerful areas, regardless of the prevailing religion, tend to focus on the most brutal aspects of whatever the dominant political system is, whether that's communism or animism, or I can't imagine a violent Buddhist, but violence against Buddhists is certainly more likely in areas where where the day-to-day struggles are horrible, painful, where people feel disenfranchised. And I have to believe that if there were more middle-class Islamic countries, that there would be more moderation. And I think that as Muslims, if they enculturate, if the strength of Islam isn't enough to keep them from enculturating into their new country, that they would become more moderate religious. As the further away they go from those power asymmetry nations, that would change their perspective on their religion. You can talk about the specific aspects of Islam that make it distinctive, but we disregard those just as easily with Judaism and Christianity and I don't know, Sikhism is actually a really bad example. I wish I hadn't brought it up. But I think that probably has a lot to do with it. The socioeconomic status of the people probably influences how they perceive the brutality of their religion or the severity of their religion. What do you think?
Sure.
Yeah, well, I two things. First of all, I mean, look at Albania and Bosnia. These are Muslim countries, but they're European Muslim countries. And so, aside from, of course, the Wahhabi, Salafi, Saudi influences that came in during the war there, when all these Muslim countries sent in these extremists, I mean, it's relatively urbanized and developed and liberal. In comparison to most third world Muslim countries. And that's another thing. Most people forget, most Muslims live in the third world. Religion in the third world is extreme. I mean, look at Christianity in Africa. It's psycho. Also, another factor that is kind of inhibits Islam in general from liberalizing is that it has a really heavy legal tradition, a very overbearing legal tradition. It's a self-producing, a conservative legal class, and I think they're quite an obstruction to liberalization as well, and the influence.
Thanks, sure. Can I just address that point, because it reminds me of when we had Hamza Tzortzis on. Hamza Tzortzis, for people who are not aware, is one of the leading figures behind an organization called the Islamic Education and Research Association, a charitable organization in the United Kingdom. And
charitable wink.
Yeah.
Whilst I have an absolute disdain for both Tzortzis and his IERA, I mean, they really do have that sort of greasy, slick, magic bean sales feel to them.
Yeah, I was actually just about to mention that, Thunder, but thank you for doing it for me. If I could just conclude my point. When he was on the show, if I can just conclude my point, please. When he was on the show, one of the issues that was raised with him was about law and Sharia law. And what I found was interesting, and I think this is perhaps an important point, is how is Sharia imposed in certain countries? And if I recall correctly, Hamza, during the course of the show, seemed to have no problem with beheading by the sword for apostasy because it was painless. That's a side point. But isn't the important thing, how are countries actually interpreting the Quran and Sharia law? Now, my understanding is that it is still the case in countries such as Saudi Arabia and Pakistan that the death penalty is still imposed by some Sharia courts for apostasy, homosexuality, and adultery. Am I wrong about that? Klingshaw.
Something important for people to note is that Sharia is kind of an abstract term. It means the law of God. In practice, what is being implemented is fiqh, which is jurisprudence, Islamic jurisprudence, which is kind of the human interpretation of the divine Sharia. Yes, I mean, hold on, I don't have the list with me, but if you give me a second. For example, in regards to homosexuality, here we go. Sorry for the hold up. I didn't have all my facts with me. Yeah, so Mauritania, Nigeria, Sudan, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, United Arab Emirates, and Iran are the only countries in the world that punish homosexuality with the death penalty. And this is because of fiqh. There's no other reason for it. Some people try to blame Western colonial influences. This is silly. Muhammad said kill gay people. Fiqh has always said kill gay people, and it's been implemented in these Muslim countries.
Sorry, I'm struggling to hear the word that you're using. The what says
F-I-Q-H.
And that means what?
Jurisprudence. Islamic jurisprudence.
Okay.
Yeah. So yes, I mean the legal tradition has been. For example, do you remember in our private discussion in Bangladesh they have Hanafi law? Do you remember that? Hanafi is one of the schools of fiqh, and so for a country to apply Hanafi fiqh properly entails things like killing apostates. This is entailed in the fiqh, but I don't know if they've actually applied that in Bangladesh. But that's an example of how a country adopts this jurisprudence into its law system.
I think on that note, on that bombshell, I am going to try and draw things to a close because we're 20 minutes over the time. I'm going to ask for last comments. Please stay with us, Klingshaw. We'll have a chat after the show ends. Last words from anyone before I give the thank yous that I owe. Anyone want to say anything?
Real quick, if anyone is an expert at audio cleanup, I recorded some audio portion from the live show we did in Austin, and it's not very good, and I need someone to help me clean up the noise level. I'm having some challenges with that. If you could contact me by personal message on YouTube, that would help.
Or alternatively through our website, magicshow.com, yes. Which is
push the website,
directly linked above the chat. Thunderfoot.
Nah, I've got nothing really to add.
Okay, in that case, can I finish off by saying thank you very much to Tony.
Mention the petition.
Yes, please.
Oh, yeah. So the Rationalizer is organizing a petition to get a recorded Skype call between Hamza Tzortzis of the IERA and himself. We're going to have it linked on our Facebook page, The Gin and Tonic Show, facebook.com/The Gin and Tonic Show. Yeah, if you want to see the Rationalizer take on Hamza Tzortzis, then please go and sign the online petition. Thanks.
Actually, I'll include it in the description to the video. Thunderfoot.
I do have one last
sure.
question for Klingshaw. It's more of a request, actually, just for everyone who doesn't quite get it. Tell us why the Gin and Tonic Show is such a funny pun.
Because gin and tonic is an alcoholic beverage, Islam forbids alcohol, and gin is a type of spirit that is talked about in the like a devil, a kind of devil that is talked about in the Quran. So it's
a derivative of genie. Yeah, it's the sort of genie.
Yeah. Oh no, genie is kind of the Latin or the English way of saying gin. And yes, Genie in the Bottle.
Yeah, so Gin and Tonic Show is actually a very clever title.
Thank you. Courtesy of the
Don't give him
Rationalizer
too much praise. He's arrogant enough as it is.
No.
On that bombshell, as I say, let me finish off by thanking Tony, who, again, working way behind the scenes to bring this show in all its technical glory. Thank you very much, Tony. Thank you also to Cream, who I know is also in the run for doing the banner for us. Thank you also to all of those that have called in and all of those that have turned up to watch. Can I also extend an invitation? Anyone that is used to working with iTunes, if you think that you can get these things up on iTunes, please get in contact with me, either through the Magic Sandwich Show or my YouTube channel. As I say, my problem is I can load them up onto a storage space on the internet, but iTunes will not recognize that. That is a problem I had, and I have tried, including getting in contact with iTunes to sort this out. I have spent so many hours on it, I have given up. Even if we can't do it on iTunes, I can just remind you that an audio file of the show should be up within 24 hours on the website. You can also follow us on YouTube, on Twitter. The Twitter is not Magic Sandwich Show, because someone had that already. And it's not the Magic Sandwich Show, because that's too long for Twitter, and it cut off the end, so it was Magic Sandwich. So to follow us on Twitter and get information about future shows, follow the DPR Jones on Twitter, and again I'll include that in the description when these are subsequently uploaded. Finally, as I say, we expected Professor Phil Moriarty of Nottingham University and contributor to 60 Symbols YouTube channel to be with us this evening. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it, but he will be on a future show, potentially the next show, which will be on the 4th of November. Until then, can I thank the panelists and also the viewers, and we shall see you in 2 weeks' time.